Okay, hey guys, this is my first YouTube video for how to draw creepy creatures. I am Arthur, by the way. And so today, for our first one, we are going to be trying to draw, well, attempting, I guess we'll have to wait and see, a Wendigo, which if you're Native American, you know what I'm talking about, but if you're not, this is this really creepy creature that will give you nightmares. It's like this undead thing, so usually it has antlers, so we're going to be doing like an elk's head for it. I like to use an elk's head, other people like to do a moose or something like that. So the thing is that you want to break down all the basic things into shapes, like shapes that you can recognize. So we're going to start with the head. I'm going to do a circle. I'm going to do a line through it. I'm going to add where that's where the muzzle would be. Now we kind of add like these areas for the cheekbones. And I know that this doesn't really look like much of eyes, but this is just like the basic skeletal structure. You want to break everything down into shapes. Okay, now we do this. This is the neck, and right now. Now I like to add like a little bit of a clavicle bone here. You can kind of see where the shoulders connect. And here, this is the pelvis. Okay. Right, just so that you know what I'm basically looking at now. Okay, there we go. Now we have a little bit of room at the bottom of the page for you to do the legs. No, yeah, okay. Yeah. Now, instead of like doing like a straight line like this, often it doesn't come out very straight, so I just like to do, then you can just erase the lines later. Okay, so now sometimes they do hooves on these things. I like to give it more human feet, but it's really up to your interpretation. So, alright, now go over to his other leg. You want to kind of do a crouching just a little bit, so you want like cat-like. Okay. Alright, here's what we got so far. Now, let's do an arm. Okay. It's a little bit weird seeing myself draw through a camera like this. So if my hand is a little bit shaky, I hope you will forgive that. Okay, so now, if you remember like the fingers from the Demogorgon on Stranger Things, you want bony, thin, spidery. These need to be the most terrifying fingers you can think about, okay? Now, right? So you got like a basic concept of what the hand is supposed to be, okay? Now, we are going to draw his second arm, or his left arm, I guess you would say, his left. Now, let's do it kind of like that. Okay, now we're going to do his other hand. Just break it down to a very simple sort of triangular shape. Now we're going to do kind of like a, see this muscle here on my hand where my thumb connects? We're going to do that. So draw like, if you're going to show that side of the hand, draw a little bump so that you know that's supposed to be there. And draw the individual bones in the thumb. Alright, now I kind of do like a little dot there sometimes so I know where the knuckle is supposed to be, or it's supposed to like poke out a bit. And now, once again, spidery fingers, yeah. That's one of my favorite parts, doing the fingers. That is a lot of fun. Alright, now this part is a little bit difficult because you need it to be symmetrical. But here's where we do the antlers. Now, the antlers, because they need to be symmetrical, you're thinking like, oh god, this is going to be horrible. But once you get it down, it's actually a lot of fun. It's where you can be kind of creative. So I like to use, as I said before, I like to use an elk's antlers as a template. So if you're not really sure what that looks like, just Google a picture of an elk, then you'll just have it set in your mind and you know what that's supposed to be, okay? So first we have one horn projection here. Now we get the second one. Now, okay, we got this. Now, from out of this horn here, it's kind of imagined as like a stem on a tree branch. It's kind of how antlers grow. We draw another shaft coming out, yeah. Now we do a point here. Now we do a second point here. Elk antlers kind of branch out like that. Now, sometimes it's 2 points, sometimes it's 3, depending on the size of the antlers, so you'll have to make that decision, but I think that we're going to do 2 points in the middle. Alright, so it should kind of almost look like a feather, kind of, so that's how you know you're doing it right. Okay, so... Okay. Once again, forgive me for my shaky hand. It's a little bit weird doing this like this, because I've never filmed myself drawing before, so it's a little bit strange. See, look here. I didn't make my antlers all that symmetrical, so I'm going to shrink this a little bit so that it's more like this. Yeah, the distance looks right there, okay? Sometimes you need to double check your work to make, if you're doing something that's supposed to be like a mirror image, to make sure that it's coming out okay. But if you don't get it right on the first time, that's okay, because that is what this is for. Okay, so now this is kind of the fun part, because you just have like this bony thing. It's like there's nothing there yet, but now we're going to do the muscles. Now remember, a Wendigo is supposed to look kind of emaciated, like zombie-like, so you don't want to overdo it with the muscles. So what you do is that you know the basic shape of what the muscles are supposed to be. So we're going to draw just a little rectangle here, and you know what, I'm going to add a little of a bump here so that we know that's where, you know, the bone in the knuckle is. Like, look at my knuckle, see? Yeah, if I was really thin, you'd kind of be able to see that bump a little bit better. Yeah, you can kind of see it there because I am skinny. Okay, so now we are going to do the upper arm. And see that? Yep. That's, just imagine that's like a tube. It's like cylindrical almost, okay? Yeah, so take a good look at that arm. If it doesn't look exactly like that, that's perfect. And you know what? I like to draw them in this position, but you could draw them jumping or stalking through the woods, whatever you want. I just like it because it looks like it's creepy, like it's watching. Okay. So now we're going to do another bump right here for his knuckle. In fact, why don't we do 2 bumps because of the way that you could see that. See, like on my wrist, you can kind of see where both the bones are. I hate to keep using myself as a template because obviously I am not a Wendigo, so my anatomy wouldn't really be a good point of reference. Okay, so moving on. We will no longer be talking about my body. Alright, so I'm sorry if it went out of focus there. Right, we're going to do a second cylinder for his other arm. Okay, now let's kind of just sort of draw where the flesh is supposed to be on here, just so that we have a very basic idea. And we're going to draw the neck. Yeah. Now, sometimes I like to draw these lines here so that it looks a bit more 3D, so where you know where the shadows are once you get to that phase, but that's a completely different step. Okay, we're going to draw the triceps here. If I'm getting the name of that muscle group wrong, please excuse me, because I'm good at some things, but sometimes I'm just a dum-dum and I get things wrong. Okay, so we are going to draw his torso. Now, I left this jutting out here because if you notice in very thin people, you'll see that their rib cage kind of pokes out a little bit. Yeah, so like, because he's supposed to be like emaciated. Okay, so also we're going to have his hip bone jut out just a little bit, just a little bump like this. We're going to add flesh over that later, but now, so now we do, I hate to be indelicate, but now we do his butt cheeks. So I don't imagine them as having junk, but we're going to do like a little bit of a bump there, just like, you know, just where you would expect that to be, because this isn't a graphic video, we have no need to include that. Also, I don't think that Wendigos have those, just my own personal imagination, so I'm not a freak, I haven't thought of this in depth. Okay, so now we're going to draw, what's that? We're going to draw another cylinder here. Yes, okay, so you got a basic idea of what the muscles in the upper leg and the thigh are supposed to look like. Now we're going to do the same on the calves. Now, you might want to draw a little bump there for an ankle, just so that you know where the ankle bones are supposed to be. Okay, now we're going to do the same on this leg. Yep, okay. Just a little bit of an ankle bone. And now we're going to do this leg. We're going to have the butt cheeks connect here. Okay, so Now we're going to do the feet. And I used to hate drawing feet. They're really difficult drawing a human foot, but if you break it down into these steps, it'll be good. Often my problem was that the toes came out looking like claws, but in this example, it's perfect because it's a Wendigo. Okay, so now, now we're going to add toes here. Yep. Almost just imagine you're drawing like a cat's foot, you know, like with a very basic little outline of the toes, and then you'll add more detail once we get to that step. So, okay, now we've drawn the bones essentially, and the muscles. So now we are going to move on to the finer details. Okay, this is where we get your eraser. And now, when you hold an eraser to this, and you just worked all this time, you're like, why am I going to erase that? I just spent all this time doing this. But actually, this is a bit of a crucial step. So we're going to erase the area around the face. Okay? Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. Now, see here? All we have left are these very thin, vague little outlines of what used to be there, but that's perfect. That's what we want. That's what we're going to be using as our guide. Okay, so we're going to start with the area around the eyes. I usually start there first since it gives me kind of like a reference to where to put the rest of the skull. I like to make my skulls look kind of anatomically correct, but this is a fantasy illustration, so you could do as much as you want. In fact, some people, instead of doing deer skulls, they do like wolf skulls or something, like they'll give them teeth. It's pretty creepy. Okay, so, alright, so there. You just want like a basic area of where this empty space where the nose should be, but the nose is rotted off, obviously. So now, you'll notice that in cloven-hoofed creatures, which a deer is, as you might have guessed, there is a split in the skull that goes all the way down. Now we don't want to make that split too dark, because otherwise it will kind of look too busy and will distract from the rest of the image, so we're just going to draw a very vague outline for the skull. Okay, now sometimes you notice there's those little pockets here, kind of around the nasal area, so we're going to draw those. And now see here? This is the area where the jawbone connects to the upper half. So I'm going to draw that. Now we're going to draw some teeth. Now I like to use actual deer teeth. Some people prefer to do like serrated teeth. It creates this really scary look. So, okay, so I'm going to draw some more deer teeth. And I'm going to draw some very long canine teeth, kind of like for ripping flesh. So that's the only area we're going to really deviate from a normal deer. Okay, so now these are the eyes thus far. Some people prefer to do like empty eye sockets for Wendigos. I like to actually fill the sockets with eyes, like really creepy eyes, but we're going to move on to that later since that's a bit more of a finer detail. So see, this area of the skull is a little bit fuller than this one. It doesn't look symmetrical, so we're going to add just a little bit of a bump here. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so erase the excess. Now, I'm going to draw the lower half of the skull. Okay, so imagine this connects to this. Draw like the outline of his jaw. See, don't imagine that you're actually drawing the figure, just imagine you're drawing the lines. So break it down into, okay, next I have to draw this shape, next I have to draw this shape. It makes it so much less daunting. That's how I did it, because if you think about the individual shapes, like, okay, this looks like a triangle, this looks like a ball, then it becomes way easier. And I'm not talking about this now, I'm not really making a lot of sense, but once you do it and you follow that technique for a little while, you'll know what I mean, okay? So, alright, we're going to darken this area. We're going to add a little bit of shadow so that you know that this area is much darker. It's much darker than the rest of it. Okay, so I was going to do the eyes later, but you know what? I'm going to do the eyes now because this is fun. Okay, so I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit. Alright, so erase the area around the eyes. Now, I'm going to draw just a little bit here. I just imagine that there's a little bit of flesh around the eyes, kind of like most of it rotted off, but some of it remained, because this thing is kind of like a weird zombie thing. Alright, so just draw like little crusty bits for the eyelids, like they're supposed to be shriveled. Now, there are a lot of different directions you could do with the eyes. You could do like human eyes, or you could do milky eyes. I've decided that I'm going to do cat eyes. Okay, so right, you want to shade just a little bit around here. And hopefully yours will look less like the lady dragon from Shrek like mine does. This doesn't look so scary. It looks creepy, but not very scary to me. It just looks like the dragon from Shrek. So, but see, here's a close-up of the eyes. Okay, so you do a little bit of shading, and then you do a white area where the light is hitting it, like reflecting. It makes it look much more 3D. Okay, so now I absolutely love doing the horns. That part is fun. So okay, so you want to just leave, like, once again, a very vague, shadowy outline of where the horns used to be. And now, imagine that the horns are kind of like trees. So there's a root. There's like a little socket area that the horn goes into, it fits into. Well, not horn antlers, excuse me. Okay, so also at the base of the antlers, in nature, they often don't grow like perfectly smooth. There's a little bit of bumps, kind of like where it's kind of like where new growth is on a tree is. It's where new branches would come out. So just draw a little bit of bump around here. So this is very sharp and pointy, so end in a fine point. I don't suggest like drawing like straight down line like this, just very carefully. Yeah, and you'll notice that there's this area where it meets the base of the horn. It's kind of curved, so we're going to do a little bit of a line there to indicate that curve. Okay, we're going to keep going here, and we're going to do the second point, and you'll notice that it gets gradually bigger as time goes on. Okay, so, okay, hey, check out that rack. Okay, that's the last attempt at a joke I'm going to make while I'm doing this, because you are not watching this for my bad dad jokes. Okay, so alright. Now I made a slight mistake here that you might make. You'll notice that I made the base of the horn here a little bit thicker than the root, and you can't really imagine that the root would be able to hold up something that heavy, so I'm going to erase this just a little bit. Okay. Let's see how this turns out. Okay, there we go. Alright, not too bad so far. Now we're going to do the second one, so basically the same technique. In fact, I'm not even sure if there's anything really relevant I could tell you here, so I might just cut this part out or fast forward, do a montage sort of thing. I haven't decided. Okay, so okay, now repeat. Now kind of use the other antler as a frame of reference so that you know like the basic shape. If you've ever played that game as a kid where you have to copy the picture, it's kind of like you find a lot in those activity books. It's basically the same thing, just copy the picture. Okay, so okay, let's make sure the distance is correct. Okay. Now, in nature, often antlers don't perfectly mirror each other. There are slight variations. So if the antlers don't look exactly the same, that's okay, because it all basically comes down to genetics and things like that, but try to make them look as similar as possible is a good way to go. Okay, so okay. Alright, so... Alright, so... let's not make the same mistake and make this antler too thick. Okay, so... let's see, in fact... might want to slim this down just a little bit. Okay. Alright, so... okay, there we go. Okay, so... now let's focus on the neck area. Now, for the first creature I'm showing you how to do, it's virtually hairless. It's not supposed to have a lot of hair, so we're just going to be drawing the skin. So, alright, so just going to do a slow sloping downward motion for the neck. Now, I think that there should be kind of like these billowing jowls, like all this disgusting loose skin that's hanging down. So basically just pretend that you're drawing like roots on a tree or something, because that's how the folds in skin often look. So yeah, oh god, that's horrible. Okay, so that's what we got so far. Now, that arm that we stressed over so much before, we are going to partially erase that. Ah! Okay, so... okay, so... alright, so what you're left is that like that ghostly image of where the arm used to be. Okay, so this thing is supposed to be really thin and bony, so what we're going to do for the shoulder is that we're going to have it almost like poking out, like you can imagine the bone poking from the skin. Now we're going to emphasize his clavicle a little bit so that you can see where the skeletal anatomy meets the joint of the arm. Okay, so... alright, so... now, you might need to do this a couple times and erase it a lot in order to get it right. That is okay. Because you really... if you don't get the skeletal anatomy to look right, it won't be really scary. And what we want here is scary, so... alright, so... kind of like... here I'm just trying to draw the folds of the skin. Yeah, so... if you've ever seen like really dry, horrible, disgusting skin, that's what we want. And for anybody watching this who happens to have bad skin, that is not a slight against you. Okay? Alright, so now we want it to have really skinny little wrists. So we're going to draw the area where the wrists meet. Okay, so now I draw the palm of its hand. Okay, so you just got like that kind of line there. Now we draw the individual fingers. Once again, I said that fingers are one of the most fun parts to draw. Just imagine that you're drawing spider legs. Okay, so now we draw the little area, his fingertip, and we add a claw. This thing is made for tearing meat. Okay, so... okay. Now we're going to draw his knuckles. We're just going to add like a little bump for the knuckles. Right? Okay, there we go. Yeah. Now with the claws, you can make them as long as you want. If you want it to look like really wild and rugged, kind of like it's like this horrible thing that's been living out in the woods, you could add one broken claw, so it's like these disgusting fingernails. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so kind of have like one finger tucked behind the other fingers, because if they're all splayed out, it won't really look like a real hand. See, like there, like imagine how you hold your hands. They're not always straight. You often have them like this, and from a side view, the fingers might be tucked or something like that. Okay. Yeah, in fact, I know we already did the neck, but might work on those folds just a little bit again, so. Yeah, okay. Alright, there we go. Now, we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did with the other arm. I'm going to erase, just leave a very vague, shadowy outline of where it used to be. Okay, so. Alright, so we're going to start with the shoulder once again. Okay. There we go. Now when you're drawing the inside of the elbow, you want to draw like a little area where the tendons are exposed because they're being pulled very tightly against the skin. So draw that there. And, okay, there we go. Okay, now for the wrist. In fact, I don't really like where that wrist was before, so I might move it like a millimeter back so that the scale looks right. Oh, once again, see, like this. Just draw the tendon that's connected to the thumb. Yeah. Once you do this for a little while, you start to notice that you notice more about anatomy, so when you see people moving in the real world, you'll actually see which muscle groups are functioning just because you're so used to drawing them. It's actually kind of interesting. Okay, so. Okay. Okay, so there we go. Right. And you kind of want to draw the excuse me, the knuckles in somewhat of a relaxed position. Kind of like a cross between, imagine like a cross between a human hand and an eagle's talon. You know, once you Google Images will actually really help you. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, just look at it and then you'll kind of get it. So, alright. Alright, so I'm going to erase some of this stuff here. It's a little bit busy here. Too many lines left over, so. Okay, so. Alright. We're just going to draw these lines here because I imagine the skin is pulled so tightly that you kind of see his ribs. Just a vague outline of the sternum. Alright, so now we're going to do the bumps of his ribs because the skin is being pulled over them. Okay, so now this is where the torso meets the hips, so we're going to draw that hip bone sticking out like that. Now we're going to draw, this line indicates where the rib cage ends. You won't need to do as much detail because the hand is covering it up, but don't ignore that area either, otherwise it won't look very realistic. Okay, so now we're going to do the leg. Okay, we're going to erase this area where the legs meet. Okay. Okay, so that's what we got so far. Right now, we're going to do one butt cheek, which is, I laugh at that because inside I am more of a 5-year-old than I am an artist. So, okay, we're going to do like a little bit of fold in the skin there. You can see where it's kind of like it's folding. Imagine that it's just leather being dried, cracked, horrible leather being pulled very tightly over a vaguely humanoid frame. Right, now we're going to do his knee. Now, you'll notice that when you think of the knee, you often think of one bone, but there's actually 2 bones in there that poke out when the knee is exposed. So we're going to do a little bit of a fold there to indicate where the skin is folding. Okay, there we go. Now the ankles should look very sharp, much sharper than would normally be on a person because of how thin he is. So, alright, so we're going to draw a line here. In fact, you know what, that's not right. Okay, we're going to draw a line here because that is where the outline of the bone is visible. You don't really see this around where the femur would be because there's so much meat there that you don't really see it. But the calf, you can definitely see the bones there. So kind of do like a square shape for the ankle. You'll notice in very thin people, their ankles are kind of like this weird square shape. Once again, I'm not shaming thin people. I'm just saying. Okay, now, you could choose to do the tendons on the feet like this, like you would see with the hands, but you just sort of have to experiment it and see if it works, because sometimes it's not necessary, it just looks kind of weird. Now, you can get creative with the toenails. We could do absolutely horrible, like witchy sort of toenails. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now just remember that the toes get smaller after you come to the middle toe, so you kind of want to shrink them a little bit. And sometimes the last toe won't even be visible, so if you just want to draw 4 toes, it works, just because sometimes the 5th toe is tucked behind the back of the foot where you wouldn't be able to see it anyway. So, and if you're familiar with Arthur Rackham, but he used to do like really weird skinny feet like that, so that's kind of what you want. Okay, so now we're going to work on the crotch area just a little bit. We're going to draw like the line of the muscles in his stomach a little bit, just a tiny bit. You don't want to add too much detail there since he's not supposed to have abs, like visible abs. So now we're going to do just like, imagine like the crotch on like a leotard or something, like being told very tightly there. Okay, there we go. That's about as much crotch detail as you need. Okay. Alright, we're going to erase around here. Yeah. Pretty much follow the same technique that you did with the other leg. In fact, you know what? I kind of drew this leg a little bit shorter than this leg. So we are going to correct this by taking off like a 1/4 of an inch from his leg. Alright, so alright, there we have the calf muscle. Okay. Might need to do this a couple times just because it's kind of an awkward position for the leg, so sometimes you'll look at it and you spend all this time on it and think it's great, but when you look at it from far away, you're like, something here isn't right. I messed up on the muscle anatomy just a little bit, and that is okay. It's all about trial and error. Okay, so once again we do the ugly toenails. Yeah, I kind of prefer that when drawing Wendigos, I usually draw the humanoid type, but I know that the type with the deer head and the antlers are so popular, so I chose that one, but I always prefer to do human feet, just because human feet, like dirty human feet with horrible toenails, they gross me out so much more than the cloven hooves, which some people draw like a deer. I don't know, deer are cute, so the hooves freak me out less than like a naked human foot. Okay, so where did I? Oh, there we go. Okay, so yeah. All right, so you might have to do this a couple times in order. You just know when it looks right. I can't really explain it to you. You just get it. Okay, so all right. Now try to avoid things looking too boxy. That's why I erased that that calf muscle right there, just because it looked too, it didn't flow the way that real muscles flow. It looked kind of choppy, so, right. Now, with the leg pressed against the thigh like this muscle will kind of squish out, so it will be a bit more noticeable. So you want to make that rounder. You want to emphasize the folds in the skin a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to draw our other butt cheek. Now we have this, and you think, yay, I drew a naked guy with horns, that's great, but there's not a lot of detail here, you know, you need to add a little bit more. So you drew the basic outline, great, but in order to make it look really real, in order to get this image to haunt your dreams forever, we need to add a little bit of real life to it to make it look more 3D. So we're going to add some shading. Okay, so we're going to add some shading. So kind of shade around here just a little bit because there's that break in the teeth. Okay, so now we're going to shade here. Now you want to do this very delicately. It took me a long time in order to get this right. So now that looks like a shadow, and you just do it in this motion like this. You do it very gently, because if you do it like this, it looks like hair. Some people prefer to do cross-hatching like this, and I do that a lot when I'm using like ink or something like that, but when I'm using strictly pencil like this, it doesn't look right. So we're going to erase those later, but for now, I'm going to focus on this. Alright, so next, we do the next fold in the skin. Alright, so... Alright. Okay. You see that? Okay, so... Alright, so now... I'm going to add a little bit of shadow around the jawbone. Okay? And around the eyes. Make it look something. Now we want to do just a little bit of shine right here, just because that's where the light's hitting. So... Okay, here we go. Alright, so let's work on the antlers a little bit. So it's a very slow process. You'll probably need to use your eraser a little bit, because sometimes you get so into it that you overshade. Yeah, so yeah, I totally used to do that when I first started experimenting with shading and things like that. I'd draw this great picture and then I would shade it and it would just all be this black blob with no detail. So, okay, so yeah, just remember that light is just as effective for conveying detail as darkness is. So, okay, so there we go. Got a little bit of shading around the antler. Yes, so just shade some of the bumps a little bit, but don't overshade them because they're such small details. If you overshade them, you'll start to lose some of the definition in that area. So also what works is that you could do this technique like this, or you could do this and you kind of fill it in just a little bit. Do very slow, steady circles. Yeah, you see that? Isn't that killer? Okay, so, okay. Okay, so just a little bit around the prongs in the antlers. Okay, so. Okay, so. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to add some shading around here. So once again, the circular motion works really well. Okay. Now see the armpit here? A lot of light is cut off because you have the arm blocking, so add a lot more shading there. Okay, so around here. And pretty much just imagine wherever the light isn't touching, that's where you want to shade it. At first it's pretty daunting because you have to remember all these areas, but then eventually you kind of get a sense for it, you know? Okay, so... Okay, that's what we got so far. Now, shade around here a little bit, in between the fingers. Yeah, you see that? Okay, so... Now we do the other arm. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a bit so you can get a better look at this. There we go. Okay, so now you want to do very delicate shading around these areas. Okay. Okay, so now this is called Where the Sun Don't Shine for a reason. And that is because there's hardly any light there because of the way that he's sitting. So we're going to shade very heavily just around there.
10 minutes a day.
Okay. Okay, we're going to shade very heavily around here, okay? Now there's a muscle here, so you want to shade around there. Okay, so just draw a little bit of shading around here. And here. A little bit of shading on the kneecap. Yeah, okay. Now, see how the arm is over this? Now you want to shade that area because the arm is blocking off the light. So you don't lose too much detail with the outline. Draw a bit of a darker line there. You're darkening the line. Okay, so this is what we got so far. Alright, so add a little bit of shading around the rib bones. I find that if you add too much, it looks a little bit like, I don't know how to say it, just like it's too much. So that's what we got so far. Now, because of the squatting position, he's cutting off light from ahead on the ground. So we're going to add a bit of a shadow underneath him. Okay. Alright, so now we have the figure, we have the shading, but it's pretty boring if there's nothing going on in the background, so we are going to erase this crap that I drew before because I was explaining stuff. And because he's a forest creature, we're going to draw some trees. Trees are so much fun because they're very basic shapes. You just draw like a couple tubes. Just draw a tube for every tree that you want. And I like to do birch trees, personally. I like those kind of trees. Okay, so... Okay. You want some of them kind of bending, like bending over. Kind of imagine that some of them are wind damaged, so... Okay, so... kind of define these lines here. I like to do trees just because you can completely let yourself go. There's no set anatomy for how a tree is supposed to look because, you know, there's always differences in light and shadow that affects the way that a tree grows. So you can just use your imagination. Just imagine this is the forest in your imagination. So just imagine where the light will be coming from. Are there mountains that would be blocking the light? Is it like a flat landscape so the branches would be kind of spread out because they're all getting light from different sources? Yeah, so it's up to your interpretation there. Okay, so now I like to do like a little bit of a root here, kind of like the root on the antler, to show where the branch meets the trunk. Okay, so this is what's really cool here. You see how his antlers are almost kind of blending in with the trees in the background. You don't want to do that too much because eventually he won't be too visible, but you can show that he's supposed to be camouflaged. So if you do it in the right amount, it creates a really striking effect. Alright, so now we're going to do we could do like trees with foliage on them. That's fun to draw because I'll show you how to do foliage at another time, but we're going to make them bare trees just because it's so creepy when you're alone in the woods and you see this like just these bare trees. You could just imagine some kind of a weird creature in there. So now we're going to add some roots. I'm going to do very basic trees because I'm kind of on a time crunch here. So, but you get the idea. Okay, so, okay. Alright, so now we're going to add another branch here. And, okay, so, now just like with the antlers, you want to make sure that the branches aren't disproportionately large in relation to the tree, because otherwise it doesn't look realistic. You can't imagine like a tree with a really skinny trunk holding up a big branch. It just wouldn't work. So now I'm going to draw a little bit more detail here. And I'm going to add another tree here. I'm going to do this pretty much the same. Yeah, just imagine, just kind of do like little tiny branches poking out here. Yeah. It's really cool to draw the trees in relation to each other because you imagine, okay, this one's competing for light and space, so is this one, and so you kind of have to anticipate how they would grow around each other. So, okay, so just draw a little shading to indicate roots. We're not going to do too much detail with roots. Okay, so we got the basic outline done. Now, since we're doing birch trees, we're going to do those cool markings. And this is good because adding detail like this, it defines the figure. So you can clearly see he's not a tree. He doesn't get lost in the background because he's just he's very bare. He doesn't have any markings. These do. So this is good for this purpose. Okay, so a little bit of markings on the roots, kind of like a zebra pattern almost. If you're doing this in color, there would be a lot more detail, but you know, because you'd be mixing the grays with the browns and everything like that. But since this is just pencil, it's going to be like this. Okay. Now it's kind of in an eye shape, the way that the birch patterns work. So it's that skinny at the edges, gets progressively thicker, and then it's skinny again, just kind of like that tapered eye shape. Okay, so yeah, it's not always perfect stripes. Yeah, because sometimes when you see people drawing birch trees, they do like these, yeah, almost like this harlequin pattern. It's not how they look in real life. So, okay, so in fact, he's getting a little bit lost in the background, so we're going to do a little bit more detail around his face. We're going to darken those lines a bit so that he's more defined among all those trees, so that he doesn't get lost and you see what the main focus of the picture is supposed to be. So, okay, so okay, so remember not to get confused and accidentally do these markings on his antlers, because one hand, if you gave him kind of like a camouflage pattern on his antlers so that he could blend in with the woods, that would be cool. Yeah, it'd be creepy because he's like, you don't know where he is. But I chose not to do that because I don't want him to get lost in the background. If you wanted to draw like leaves or something, or twigs coming out of his antlers so that he looks like he's a tree, then he could just sneak up on you in the woods, and that would be cool, but I prefer to do it this way. Alright, so a little bit of detail here. Darken these lines here because that's the shadows on the actual roots. So now we're going to add a little bit of shading on the trees so that they look a bit more three-dimensional. So just use the same technique that you used for the skin. Okay, so just the areas that are cut off from the light. So to down the lower half of those branches. Okay, so... Alright, this is pretty rudimentary. This is just like a beginning thing for a starter. I would usually add a lot more detail than this, but I think this is a pretty good start. So on your first lesson on how to draw creepy creatures, you have drawn a Wendigo. Hopefully yours looked better than mine. Okay, I will see you guys later, and we will be learning how to draw more creepy creatures. So this is Arthur, and I'm out.